A warm welcome, everyone. I hope you had an early lunch or are having a lunch bento in front of you now. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, presented by the National Centre of Excellence for Workplace Learning, NACE Led by NYP. My name is Patricia. I'm the MC for today's presentation. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can type them into the question box in your Zoom Q&A control panel. We will address your questions during the panel discussion at the end. Today, I'm delighted to see familiar friends in the learning community, new organization reps and leaders, colleagues, and our valued partners from the agency, TAC, and the union. We appreciate your presence, and we walk you through a series of presentations by NACE to support organization in workplace learning implementation. In addition, we welcome partners and collaborators to join this journey with NACE in building a sustainable workplace learning culture in Singapore. So let's accelerate your workplace learning journey without further ado with the first presenter, Mr. Albert Tan. Albert has been in the adult training and development for more than 15 years. He advocates lifelong learning, constantly exploring opportunities to try out new things, and he is a valued member of NACE Pioneer team and works actively with the organization to support them in workplace learning. So over to you, Albert. Let's get started.
Thank you very much, Pat. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking your lunch time to join us in this learning journey. Today, I will bring you through how the framework can translate to actual outcome. By implementing a sustainable learning culture through the National Workplace Learning Framework, what are some of the observations that we have seen and what the National Workplace Learning Framework entails, right? Before going through, I will share with you the agenda of what I'm going to share to talk about. It will include an introduction about NACE and the workplace learning itself. Many people have been asking, what is workplace learning? What does it entail? I will do a brief sharing. All right. Next, I will go into the National Workplace Learning Framework and the certification itself. What is it all about? Some of you might have heard about it, or some of you might not have. So this is the perfect opportunity for me to clarify. Last but not least, one of the most important things I will go through will be sharing on the observation of the impact on how technically implementing a good workplace learning culture can influence a company. As compared to other companies, you may not or in the process of implementing this culture, right? So without further ado, let me go into the first aspect first, which is technically, what is NACE led by NYP all about? NACE was set up really to help organizations retain talent, to help companies to grow competencies through workplace learning. The idea is really to champion workplace learning by helping it to become a strategic, competitive advantage for Singapore organizations, right? We want to help companies implement structured workplace learning system. We also collaborate with other IHL and IAL to establish NACE centers in creating a multiplier effect to help proliferate workplace learning and implementation, right? So we were launched in 2018 by Mr. Ong Kang, right? And right after that, we start to, again, like I mentioned, work closely with Polytechnic, work closely with other TACs, unions, and agencies to really propagate the value and benefits of workplace learning to employers and employees. In fact, saying that, I just want to let you know that tomorrow we will be jointly conducting a training with SMAP, running training program on workplace learning blueprint. Do let me know if you're interested. This is also one example of how we work with TACs to provide contextualized training for the sectors, right? Apart from that, right, in 2020, we actually launched the National Workplace Framework, which I will share with you more subsequently. And very importantly, in 2021, right? In 2021, Minister Lawrence Wong actually launched this National Workplace Certification that I've been always talking about, with the idea of recognizing companies for the effort that they put in to build up a learning organization. And I'm very happy to share that this year, April 2022, right, Minister Chan has actually went on to present the awards to the 9 prestigious companies who have actually embarked on this certification process and gotten the award, which again, of course, I will share with you more. So again, this illustrates that NACE itself is pushing and helping companies to establish a good workplace learning culture and practice within the organization through many, many different multipliers. On top of that, just to let you know, with this success, okay, National Center of Excellence for Workplace Learning, led by NYP, has successfully helped organizations such as NACE at RP, NACE at TP, SP, NP to establish other NACE centers, again, to help really to proliferate workplace learning to all companies we have been working closely with. Right. So this is really a national agenda which we are trying very hard to accomplish. Now, with that being said, I will run through what are some of our track records. All in all, we have actually helped more than 1,700 companies in one way or another in implementing workplace learning. So again, this experience that we have gone through will be put to good use when we work with the other companies. Right now, going into the detail of what is workplace learning, what are some of the challenges. I guess all organizations, all those who are here, presenting here, attending the session here, will understand that some of the pain points which organizations face, right? Many a time you will have this challenge of company having the inability, they are unable to really plan ahead to acquire new skills for future growth. They may not be also aware that what are the current and future skills gap, which is very, very important to help companies move forward. Another high pain point is managers finding that work may not be done consistently. There are also a big challenge in proper process and documentation for KM. Knowledge management, as we all understand, is crucial in all work environment and all organization. Why? Because at the end of the day, if all these best practices are not properly documented, it will be lost when somebody leaves, right? So one other very pertinent challenge that companies are facing, people who are holding the skill set, people who are holding the knowledge, may not always share with their colleagues or may not share with their subordinates. Why? Because sometimes they will feel that, oh, I need to keep this just to myself so that I will be very important. Now, this is a real challenge, right? And what will this happen when a person leaves? Okay, the loss of productivity. All these are really pain points faced by organizations. And what is the impact when you look at all these pain points? We really talk about whenever there's a high turnover rate, how are we going to retain the employees better? We are talking about how are we going to replicate when employees leave, okay, senior and experienced employees leave. How to ensure that such knowledge transfer are successfully passed down? Is there a way to document the best practices? How to ensure tacit knowledge are well documented, right? So what is the solution to this? Right? So now I'm going to share with you what we identify as some of the solutions will be workplace learning. What is workplace learning all about? It is really about the acquisition of competency, be it in terms of formal or informal means that occurs in the workplace. Right? That is workplace learning. I want to highlight the important part about at the workplace. Why? Because workplace is the place where you can achieve the best learning opportunity. If you follow the Michael Lombardo's model, 70-20-10 learning model, we can see that 70% of the learning comes from on-the-job experience. right? The rest are 20% in terms of coaching and mentoring, and only 10% when they go to classes or going through reading. These put the emphasis that workplace itself is the source of learning. And most importantly for companies, you may not want, you want someone to learn while doing the work itself, and not so that it is constructive, so that it is, you can remain competitive and productive. So it's all about making deliberate effort to think through how to do certain things, how to do planning, how to implement things. Right? What is the impact of workplace learning? All right, we have seen that it hastens onboarding process. We have seen that it contextualized learning because it is for the work while doing the work itself. It consolidates experience and best practices. And last but not least, right, it has shown that it has improved staff morale by having proper training and development plan. So why have workplace learning? Like I've shared, it contextualized learning, consolidate experience, hasten onboarding, improve employee morale. And I am going to prove to you that it is really happening, right? I've consolidated some of the feedback from different companies, right, to illustrate that this is really happening. These are feedback from different. For example, right? For example, when we work with one of the companies, they shared that by having a good workplace learning system in the process, by coaching, by having clear guidance at the workplace on how to interact with customer, right? One company has shown that the staff actually get more confident. And what is the tangible improvement? It is improvement in terms of retention rate of contracts. Okay? Why? Because clients find that the first point of contact are now more competent. We have worked with another company, they talk about retaining ideas and solutions, right? So they can actually see a 15% improvement in terms of onboarding process and training time. Why? Because now it becomes a culture to document. Okay, it becomes a culture to document. They put in place system, meaning that ensuring that all the staff do consolidate their information. Next, another company highlighted that staff is now able to work independently only after 4 months. Why? Again, because deliberate planning in terms of building up training structure within the organization. Last but not least, another company shared that, right? It boosts confidence when it comes to technical part with relevant structured training putting in place. They can actually improve the staff morale. And what does this translate to? It translates to proper morale improvement, and it will also translate to better staff retention. Right. So after sharing with you some of the benefits and importance of workplace learning, I would like to take this opportunity. Now I will go into the topic about workplace learning framework. So what is this National Workplace Learning Framework all about? Right. It is talking about there are 6 components in the National Workplace Learning Framework. This is actually being developed and contextualized by NACE, adapted from Germany. In Germany, right, they do have a very holistic framework to make sure that companies can embark on to become a learning organization. Right? And now for us, what is going to happen is that we contextualize this. In Germany, there are 9 components, but bringing this concept over to Singapore, we have actually brought it down to 6 components, ensuring that it is related, it is relevant to our culture, our policies, and our implementation. What are these 6 components? They are the strategy, leadership, planning, training needs analysis, environment, and implementation and processes, which I will run through one by one later. I just want to highlight that when you look at the 6 components, don't be so fearful and say that, oh, wow, this looks very complex. Why? Because the key characteristic of this framework, yes, you look at it, it is holistic, but it is not prescriptive, meaning that we provide the scaffolding for you to embark to establish a framework, but there are many ways to achieve the outcome. The emphasis is how to achieve those outcomes using the framework as a scaffolding. We look into future ready through learning. We look into integrating existing practice. Very important. We are not going to renew everything, right? But more importantly, it has to integrate into the existing system. Right? It must be inclusive, right? And aligned. Very important. Aligned to individual and organizational growth. At the end of the day, the framework aims to help both the organization and the individual, right? So again, I want to highlight the whole purpose of this framework really aims to serve as a scaffolding for organizations who want to build up a good learning culture by helping them to develop the workplace learning system, processes, and practices. It provides a pathway to achieving excellence in workplace learning. This is all about growing employees' competencies, aligning learning to the company's business growth. And last but not least, we are talking about improving retention, right? This is something that all companies are facing a challenge, and this is how we can potentially improve. So Minister Lawrence Wong, when we actually launched this whole certification process, he is really talking about the importance of maximizing workplace as a source, as a place for learning, so that employees can continue to learn the job. At the same time, companies can continue to achieve their agenda, right? So now I will go into the individual component of the framework. Number one, it is about strategy. Whether a company anchor competency development as a strategic goal. Again, aligning to the company's needs. Whether company takes stock of their competencies, the current competencies, the future competencies, so that they are aligned in terms of promoting benefits of workplace learning within the organization. Let me give you an illustration. Right? As we all know, right? If you look at the changes, the World Economic Forum, we can see that there are new skill sets that is arising. Right? What are the new skills required? Companies need to make sure they put in place these learning goals aligned to the strategic needs. How many times have you actually heard people saying, oh, we do not have staff who is able to do this work? Oh, one department is no longer relevant. You know, the staff is no longer relevant. So the question is, if we put in place a good strategic thinking, planning right from the start, to put in place strategic planning in terms of competency development, could this be mitigated? If a company put in place, think through how they need, what they aspire to do, what are their goals in the future, they would have planned ahead, they will make sure that their staff will be upskilled relevantly, right? So this is a very important component within the framework itself, where it can actually help companies to think through. Fortunately, right, and thankfully, Singapore has actually some very useful resources that can help companies in terms of strategizing. One of them is the Industry Transformation Net, the ITN, right, which companies can reference it to help the company in mapping their own needs, right? So some of, if you are not aware, there are actually 6 cluster, 23 industries inside this ITM, which companies can reference to, right? So by looking at it, they can plan their own future. They can plan what to look into when they need to develop the competencies. And again, in case you may not be aware, there is something called the Skills Framework by SkillsFuture Singapore, SSG. Right? This will give a holistic view on the sectoral info, competencies required for work. So it is useful for both organizations as well as individual. Most importantly, it is contextualized to Singaporeans' needs because it is collated from many companies, a huge number of companies in Singapore identifying their needs. Right? It becomes a very good reference for all to take note, okay, when they need to plan the future. So with that being said, this is something that companies can think through when they need to strategize what to do in terms of planning for their own future as well as learning needs. The second very important component that we want to talk about, it is really about leadership. Right? Whether leaders are role model in continuous learning, whether senior leadership develop and empower leaders to be coaches and mentors, right? Of course, very important, we always say policy drives behavior. Whether do we have relevant policies to help to develop employees? We have seen Google being the top employers for the second straight year. How did they achieve it? Because you know what they say? Because manager, leadership, training, mentoring sessions, all these help to put them as a strong employer of the year. Okay, best employer in Singapore. When you actually have a good leadership, when you actually implement a good system, a good learning system, staff will feel supported, right? They will feel inspired by leaders. And by doing so, there'll be learning from leaders and peers can be actively being implemented. The next item about the framework is all about planning. Are there proper learning programs in place? Do they put in place schedules, right? Doing the lip service will not help because planning have to be intentional and deliberate. Whether there are induction programs in place, to whether do we actually select relevant trainers and coaches. So this focus of this component focus in terms of planning will help companies develop kinship professionals. Why do we say that? Many companies may have training map out for the verticals, right? So-called what we call the deep skill. But as we all know, it is very, very important to have cross-disciplinary competencies such as teamwork, communication. All these are very, very essential, which my colleague, Mr. Martin, will share a bit more later. Right? Another important, the fourth component about the framework really talks about needs analysis, right? Do companies send staff for training just to fulfill the KPI? Do they just send staff to go for training or learning just to meet the to ensure that somebody go for learning and training without identifying what are the skills gap? So it is important, right? When an organization, when a department sends staff for training, they have to really understand what is the need, right? Saying that, for example, we have to identify what are training related issues, what are non-training related issues, identify them so that proper mitigation method can be addressed. We all understand companies will have constraint, resources, but what is the emphasis? How do we actually put in place? For example, is there training plan put in place to support the needs of individual employees? Another component in the framework that we want to highlight will be in terms of building a good environment, right? Creating a conducive environment to support learning opportunities, whether is it flexible, whether it promotes professional development. For example, companies are talking about inability to get staff. So question is that, do we have a good environment set up to help ladies, for example, to integrate back to the workforce, maybe to look into re-employment of seniors or youth who may want to choose for short stint. All these are consideration when we talk about components. Next, we want to talk about, very important, implementing learning processes, implementing solutions. Do you have the system to integrate, to support all the things that we have been talking about, right? So, going into the, after giving an overview of the framework itself, I will talk about the certification process, right? A bit of the certification process. This is actually launched by Minister Lawrence Wong on the 6th of May, 2021, really aim to provide recognition for companies who are advocates of having a learning culture within the organization. At the same time, very important, to provide an independent assessment opportunity for companies to review their strength and areas for improvement in building a learning organization. We all heard about the good things about it, how to do a self-assessment. So that is the reason why the certification was launched. It is jointly certified by NACE as well as the Singaporean German Chamber of Industry and Commerce. What are the things that we look at when we are talking about the certification assessment? We are talking about the approach. When we have the 6 component, at the end of the day, what is the approach, how you plan ahead? And very, very important, we talk about the application and outcome. You can have the best training, but if it cannot go through the actual testing, right, the application and outcome will really show. And this is also the opportunity that NACE itself can go in to understand how best to improve it and advise the company at the end of the day. Right? There are actually 4 certification awards comprising of competence, silver, gold, and platinum, right? So with this certification process itself, identifying the, we can actually, companies can know where they are at and what are their aspiration and what is the target for the next subsequent years. The certification is actually, let me briefly run through with you what is the workflow and process itself. It will start off with, of course, company going through a self-evaluation to identify where are their strengths before they submit the application. After which, NACE and staff from NACE who are actually trained in this process will actually go down to conduct on-site interviews to evaluate the processes, the system within the organization before submitting the report to the award committee comprising of many important personnel from the industry. For example, we are talking about companies from Infineon, right? Companies from SICK, right? So these are really industry leaders who can help to look into the award itself. Right. So I'm happy to share that in April this year, we have actually awarded the award to 9 companies, comprising of companies such as SBST, SMRT, and so ST Logistic, right? So these are companies really demonstrating exemplary outcomes, yeah, who are really advocates of workplace learning. Yeah. So the question is, some people may ask, well, I've heard much about this certification, and I've also been sharing about what are some of the perks, some of the benefits, right? Really, why me as an organization would want to embark on this certification? Apart from the recognition, okay, apart from the recognition that ultimately you will be recognized as a company who is an organization who is an advocate of workplace learning in Singapore. More importantly, for some of them, it is also a learning and sharing opportunities with other certified companies. Okay, with this COP in mind, okay, companies, more and more organizations can join together to learn from each other in this aspect. So, like I've shared, some real examples when what do we observe when there is a workplace learning culture within the organization? For example, in terms of the establishment, we can see that best practices being documented. Because once this is documented and normalized, we have seen companies will not complain that, oh, I have some senior staff who refuse to share information. Well, why? Because right in the first place, a system is in place to help to document all this information, right? We are talking about at middle management level, they also feel more supported. Why? Because they know what they need to train their staff. Very important, we have seen staff are generally more receptive to changes. Why receptive? Because a clear communication plan and training plan is in place to help them to change. They know that, oh, if a change is in place, there is a system to help me to adapt. So that is what we observe from the company, right? For the individual wise, they also feel good that they are contributing to the success of the company, right? They also understand that I have a very clear career progression plan in mind. There is open communication. So technically, they are more keen to stay within the organization, right? So these are really things that we have been seeing. And what other traits do we observe? Employees understood, aligned to the business goals, right? They know that learning is being promoted. Employees feel connected, inspired by leaders. Again, in terms of the leadership, by putting in proper leadership system in place, we can know that leaders are more supportive of training. Employees feel that this is someone I can look out for. This is someone that I look up to, and I would want to aspire to learn from this guy, right? Customized training, custom fit learning, meaning that things that you learn will not go to waste. It will not be saying, oh, why am I spending time to learn something which is not relevant, right? And staff are technically more happy to learn all this important information, needs analysis done to justify the learning, the outcome. We talk about learning led to increase level of participation. Access to learning led, okay, they are able to, it is more conducive, it is also a good opportunity for them to embark on learning. Very last but not least, we are talking about able to adapt very fast to changes. Why? Because the system itself is able to adapt and help the employees upskill themselves. So after sharing with you about the National Workplace Learning Certification, right, we are really advocating, driving capability through this whole framework itself. It can really turn every employee into a learner. Focusing on competency development, building a culture of learning at the workplace itself with better KM, okay, better knowledge management, making sure that people, right, every single individual is keen to share, will not try their best to, retain my knowledge so that I don't pass down to everyone, because everyone becomes an advocate of workplace learning, increase employee engagement, and last but not least, ultimately helping everyone to grow and develop together, right? So with that being said, I will end my part and I will pass my time back to the MC. Patricia, please.
Hi, thank you, Albert, for showing us how organizations can take stock of their workplace learning readiness through the National Workplace Learning Framework and apply for certification. We received queries about sharing the slides after the event. Unfortunately, we will not send the slides, but we will be uploading the presentation at our NACE website by end of the week. You'll receive the notification when the video is ready. So stay tuned for that. Coming up, we have our next presenter, Mr. Martin Lee. He will share the development of critical core skills through workplace coaching. Martin is a senior specialist with NACE Led by NYP. He has more than 15 years of learning and development experience in tertiary education and workplace learning. He undertakes industry consultation, leads projects in developing workplace learning solutions and systems, and conduct learning needs analysis and the development of workplace coaching. Let's welcome Martin. Martin.
Okay, very good afternoon to everyone. We're so glad that you are able to join us this afternoon. Just a quick check. You guys hearing my sound okay? Fantastic. All right, and my name is Martin. I'm one of the senior specialists from NACE. And today, after hearing from Albert kind of give you the big picture of what workplace learning is all about and some of the different components in the workplace learning framework. And now I'm just going to zoom in on one particular aspect of workplace learning, and that's specifically in the area of workplace coaching. And in my presentation today, I'm really going to talk about how companies can make use of workplace coaching to develop critical core skills. Skills like problem solving, which are important for all our employees to have. And I'm going to suggest to you that one of the most effective ways to actually learn core skills is in the workplace through workplace coaching. So today my presentation is on developing critical core skills through workplace coaching. All right, so when we talk about coaching, coaching involves the development of skills and knowledge, helping people to improve their performance so that they can contribute towards the achievement of organizational objectives. And in the market today, of course, there are many different genres of coaching. There's life coaching. So for those of us, who's going through a midlife crisis like myself, we may engage a life coach to help us to determine our goals and our aspirations in terms of our lives. There's health coaching where people help you to improve your physical health, your mental health. In the corporate context, we often hear about executive coaching, and that's where we look at individuals who could potentially be leaders of the organization. We bring in coaches to help them to develop their leadership skills. But today I want to focus on the genre of coaching that we call skills and performance coaching. So this is where we help employees and team members to develop and build their skills through coaching as a learning intervention and as a process, helping them to improve their performance. John Whitmore, one of the fathers of modern coaching, and some of you may be familiar with his model. He developed the GROW model. He said this. He said that coaching is an activity that is designed to improve performance, and coaching in the workplace must involve turning work situations into learning opportunities, as this is increasingly seen as an important part of what it is to manage. And I especially like this quote because at the end of the day, the best place to learn really is in the context of work. So if I want to learn how to problem solve, sure, in the workplace, from a day-to-day basis, we encounter all kinds of problems. Someone comes alongside me, coaches me, guides me on how to problem solve. That's very powerful. If I want to learn to be adaptable, another very important core skill, again, what better place to learn that than in the workplace? Because, we are all subject to all kinds of changes from time to time, and we've got to adapt to new IT systems. We've got to adapt to new ways of delivering our services and our products. And so all these different situations, right, provide a very rich learning environment for us to develop core skills, especially with the help of a coach. Many of us as leaders wish that we had more time on our hands, all right? So we are all very, very busy, very overworked, a lot of things to attend to. And one of the key benefits really of coaching is that if it is done properly, coaches actually begin to manage and develop their own performance, right? So your coachee is not going to come to you for a solution for every operational issue that he faces. But over time, he can start to manage his own performance. He is able to reflect. He's able to identify some of his own gaps and take action to develop himself. So coaching really is a very empowering form of intervention where the coachee is empowered to understand his own performance and to manage his own performance and develop himself with the help of the coachee. Okay, so some of us may be wondering, so what then is the difference between coaching and training, right? So training is an idea that many of us are very accustomed to, and when we think of training, we think of attending a workshop or attending a webinar such as this one, or having classroom or face-to-face training. And so when we look at training, essentially as an intervention, training is more directive, right? So when you attend a training session or when you attend a webinar such as this one, the trainer or the speaker is going to give you information. He's going to share with you information. He's going to share with you some knowledge or some tools. So it's kind of directive, right? And the focus is really on telling and instructing the learner. And there's a place for that. And that's very valuable and very important. And the expectation is that the trainer is going to provide information. Now, coaching, on the other hand, all right, is less directive. So it's not so much me giving you instructions or telling you the best process to adopt or the best procedure to adopt, but it's helping you to learn and discover what works and what doesn't work. Okay, so coaching is different from training in that aspect. And one of the things that I would like to suggest to you is that when training is combined with coaching, the outcomes are fantastic, because at the end of the day, if you attend, say, a coaching workshop like this one or a webinar on coaching, sure, you will learn some tools, you will learn some tips, and then when you go back to your organization or your company, you're going to have to apply those tools. Now, what happens if after today's webinar or after the workshop, I say to you, hey, let's meet up once a month, okay, and I'm going to check in with you on a monthly basis, and you are going to share with me how you have been using some of the tools and coaching ideas that we shared with you during this webinar or during this workshop. How has that been for you? Did you encounter any challenges? Maybe, in your coaching at your organization, you found that actually the coaches may not be as responsive as I expected them to be, or I hit a certain roadblock, or with a certain coachee, I don't seem to be making any breakthroughs. And through those sessions, right, together, we process and we reflect and we see how we can circumvent some of these challenges that we encounter through the actual coaching. Now, that I want to suggest would be extremely powerful, because you have learned the theory and the concepts from the workshop or the training or the video, and then you apply it back in your own organization, in your own department, in your own team, and a coach then comes along with you, alongside you, and once a month, right, helps you to reflect, helps you to navigate the challenges, and then over time you move towards mastery. You move towards mastery, and you become better and better as a coach. So coaching as an intervention, when used together with training, yields very good results. Okay, so then if you want to develop coaching expertise within your own organizations, you want to get people to start coaching their team members, what kind of skills do coaches need, right? So what kind of skills do they need to have and to develop in order to be an effective coach? And I like to suggest there are 4 key skills that coaches need to develop, right? And first, and most importantly, coaches need to have the ability to work with their coachees to set goals, right? So goal setting is a very crucial skill if you want to be an effective coach. Then a lot of coaching is about giving feedback and asking questions, right? So later on, I'll talk a little bit about asking questions. So giving feedback to your coachee, all right? Asking questions to open up your coachee's thinking, all right, to generate options for him. That's another very crucial skill. Then supporting development and learning, being able to recommend resources that your coachee can tap into to develop himself. And again, I'll be touching a bit on this in the later part of my presentation as well. And finally, very, very important, being able to not just listen, but to listen actively. Not just listen to the words that are being spoken, but the unspoken as well. Active listening, very important skill for coaches. Now, coaching, I would like to suggest, is really a partnership and a collaboration between the coach and the coachee, right? So it's not a one-way downloading of information, or it's not a relationship where I tell you what to do. It's my way or the highway. You know, I've been there, done that. I've been in this industry for 20 years. Here's how you should do things. So it doesn't work that way. So coaching really is about partnering, all right, with your coachee and collaborating or working with him to help him to grow and develop the skills that he needs. Now, since coaching is essentially a collaboration and a partnership, then it goes to show that actually both the coach and the coachee has a very important role to play in order for coaching to be effective. On the part of the coach, what the coach does is he helps perhaps to detect what are some of the gaps in the coachee's knowledge, skills, or attitude. And in the context of my presentation today, I'm talking about core skills. So perhaps as a coach, over time, you recognize that the person you're coaching needs to improve on his problem-solving skills, right? So you help him to see what are some of the gaps. Or maybe he needs to be able to adopt transdisciplinary thinking, where he's able to consider ideas and concepts outside his own domain and bring that into his analysis of things, right? So that could be a gap that you detect as a coach. Now, having regular meetings with the coachee is very important. So right now, I believe in many organizations, ad hoc coaching is taking place in some form or other, right? So when you have a team debrief or a meeting with your team, there could be some coaching going on there. But I would like to encourage everyone to take it one step further. Make coaching intentional. Have an actual plan how you want to coach your team members. And then flowing from that plan, conduct regular meetings to implement coaching. The coach is also there to provide feedback, all right, and to facilitate the coachee's learning. Now, the coachee himself has to understand that the relationship is a collaboration, so he has to be accountable for his own learning as well, right? Very important. He needs to recognize that. Clarify any areas of uncertainty. Okay, so this one typically I used to teach. So sometimes when I go to class and I ask students, do you have any questions? everybody says no questions, all right, because they may be a bit embarrassed to ask a question. But really, in a coaching relationship, if there's enough psychological safety, the coachee should be able to clarify any areas of uncertainty, to raise questions with his coach. And then to participate in generating ideas as well, right? So I'm not waiting for my coach to tell me the solution or to give me all his ideas, but I am part of the process of generating ideas. And then, of course, taking action and then reporting your progress to your coach. Okay, so again, it takes two hands to clap, right? So the coach and the coachee, all right, need to realize what are their roles, okay, and then if both are clear about their roles, then a lot can be done from the coaching. Coaching is also about having the right mindset, right? So coaching is sometimes described as a mindset, and the coaching mindset is basically what we believe about the people that we work with. So Sir John Whitmore says that unless you believe that people possess more capability than they are currently expressing, you will not be able to help them express it. So what you believe about your team members, about your direct reports, or about your peers, right, will actually determine the effectiveness of coaching. Okay, so coaching is about getting the best out of people. And why is it that the mindset of the coach is important? Because eventually, what we really think about a person will show in our attitude, in our body language, in our tone of voice, in our interaction with our coaches. Okay, so we need to pause and reflect as a coach, right? What do we believe about the people that we are coaching? Okay, and so it's very different, in terms of how you see things or how you see people, right? So if you see that, John is facing a problem, okay, and you compare that to a belief that John is the problem, and then you compare that to a belief that John is resourceful and he's capable of learning, that would be a difference, substantial and significant difference in the mindset. Okay, and depending on which of these statements you believe, it will shape the way you interact with John. Okay, so being a good coach really is also about identifying, being aware of your own mindset, okay, as a coach, and with that awareness, right, then you can enter into the coaching relationship and be more effective in the way you coach. Okay, so in workplace coaching, of course, we always talk about how to close gaps. Okay, and some of these gaps could be in terms of technical skills or functional skills, right? These are skills directly related to the work that I do. But in the context of my presentation today, some of these gaps could also be core skills. Okay, so gaps in terms of decision making, gaps in terms of the ability to problem solve, gaps in terms of how a person collaborates with the rest of his team, how to build inclusivity. All right, so these are some potential gaps that as a coach, you want to work with your coachee to identify. Okay, and of course, in your initial conversations with your coachee, it is also helping your coachee to be aware of those gaps, right? Because you may think that your coachee needs to improve on his problem solving, but he thinks that he's fine. I'm really very good at problem solving. Okay, so in the initial coaching conversations, it's really about helping the coachee to see and to become aware of what are some of his gaps. So how do we know what the gaps are if you want to coach your team member, right? So really there are different ways. Here are some of the more common ones, right? Through your observation of work performance, right? So if you work on projects together and you observe how your team member is performing his work, that could give you some clues as to what the gaps are. Okay, so that's one possibility. Another possibility is your team member actually tells you, I feel that this is a gap for me. I feel that I'm unable to think strategically and adopt systems thinking to see how my decisions impact the rest of the organization. So if your team member shares that with you, great. Then you already have a gap that is clearly identified, and both of you can start to work together to see how those gaps can be closed. Another source of feedback could be from colleagues, supervisors, or even customers that have worked with the person that you're coaching. Okay, so now I'm just going to touch a little bit on core skills. Okay, so I think earlier Albert showed you the T-shaped model. All right, so that's another way of presenting core skills as well. And core skills are basically transferable skills, all right, that applies across sectors, functional areas, and job roles. And sometimes core skills are referred to as soft skills. So we see that kind of terminology as well, or employability skills. All right. And why are they called employability skills? Because they help individuals to be employable. Right. So these are skill sets that, whether I'm with company A or I join another company later, they are important skill sets for me. Okay. So it helps to facilitate career mobility. And very importantly, it helps to support the acquisition of technical skills. Okay, so learning agility could be a core skill, how you learn things, right? And you need to be able to understand how best to learn things in order to learn things, right? So the acquisition of core skills can actually support the acquisition of technical skills. Okay, so here are some concrete examples. So if you're a software engineer, for example, the technical skills that you need, which are specific to your job as a software engineer, would be things like software development. Or if you are into logistics, being able to operate the WMS system or optimizing an e-commerce website, right? So these are technical skills specific to a particular job role. But on the other side of the fence, there are also core skills that are very important. So whether you are into warehousing or you're a software engineer or you need to optimize e-commerce websites, you need to be able to problem solve, right? Of course, the nature of the problem that you encounter would differ depending on the role that you take, but you need to be able to problem solve. You need to be able to evaluate different decisions and make good decisions. Okay, you need to be able to collaborate with team members, especially with the rise in team-based structures today, right? A lot of the work that we do is done in the context of teams. So being able to collaborate with another team member is absolutely critical, right? Then being able to communicate, learning agility, adaptability. These are all examples of core skills. Now, core skills are important skills, okay, and Google, which is one of the organizations that has really looked into this idea of core skills, actually did some research among their own managers. And from their internal research and the data that they captured, they actually discovered that among all the managers, the most effective ones, all right, actually embody 8 different behaviors or skills. And the interesting thing about what Google found in terms of their most effective managers was that actually a lot of these skills that the effective managers had were soft skills or core skills. And of course, having good technical knowledge is important as well. So they did find that having key technical skills and being able to advise their teams on these technical areas is important. But equally important is the fact that the manager is a good coach. The manager is able to empower his team and he doesn't micromanage his team. The manager is able to express concern for his team members' success and personal well-being, something that's very important in the times of the pandemic and post-pandemic, right? Being a good communicator, career development, these are all soft skills or core skills. Okay, so having the right core skills is extremely valuable, okay, and it actually helps to improve the performance, your performance and your team's performance. Okay, so now that I have covered quite a bit, okay, I'm just going to invite everyone to participate in a little Mentimeter activity. And the question that I would like to invite everybody to respond to, and you can scan the QR code that you see on the screen, is what are some core skills that might be important for your organization? Okay, so you can scan the QR code and put in some of your responses. What are some core skills that might be important for your organization. Okay, so let's share some of the responses that have come in. Okay, so communication seems to be a recurring theme, right? So a lot of you have indicated that the ability to communicate well is an important core skill. Critical thinking, yes, that's very crucial as well, right? So in today's the world of fake news, right, and overload of information, being able to look at the facts, all right, being able to critically examine different ideas, to challenge ideas, I think that's very important. Problem solving, quite a number of you has mentioned that. Okay, okay, teamwork, yep. Okay, communication. Okay, empathy, yeah. Agility to respond to changes. Okay, certainly very important skills. Self-care, I like that. So being able to take care of your own physical and mental well-being, all right, very important as well. Okay, so I see, yes, innovation, okay, flexibility, leadership. Okay, great. Okay, so I guess many of us feel that core skills are important, right, for our organizations. And of course, the exact content of those core skills may vary, but we certainly see that it's important for us to develop not just in our technical abilities, but as well as our core skills as well. Okay, thank you very much for your contributions to this Mentimeter. Okay, let me just move on with my presentation. Okay, so now I'm going to share a little bit about using problem solving as an example, how coaching could be applied. Okay, and just now in the Menti, we saw quite a number of you mention actually problem solving is a core skill that's important for your organization. Okay, so in today's world, problems come in all shapes and sizes, right? So your problem could be, hey, our customer satisfaction scores are dropping. Okay, your problem could be, we're not generating enough sales leads. Okay, your problem could be, our people are leaving in droves, right? Our employee attrition rate is going up. Okay, or perhaps seeing a lot of safety breaches in our factory, or employee engagement scores are falling. Okay, so these are just some examples, right? And I'm sure you can think of many more examples of problems that you encounter on a daily basis. Now, if you want to deal with problems, there are two ways to do it. So number one is, right, your team member comes to you with a problem and says, boss, I have this problem now. I'm not generating enough sales leads, right? Can you help me? One way, of course, is you provide the solution, right? Here's how you should do it. Okay, this is what you should do. Follow step 1, step 2, step 3, and you solve your problem. All right, but I would like to suggest to you that perhaps that may not be the best way if you want your team member to develop the skill of problem solving and you want him to eventually be able to solve problems himself. So rather than just providing the solution to your team member, perhaps the approach could be using coaching, and where you work with your team member to establish what the real issues are. All right, to maybe rethink the goals. What is it that you're trying to solve or you're trying to do? Explore options, right? Are there other ways by which this problem can be solved? Okay, challenge assumptions or even biases. And then very importantly, sometimes if the team member is new as a coach, you help him to build confidence so that he's willing to try solutions, all right, and to take that step forward. He doesn't get stuck. And as I mentioned, of course, one of the key skills of a coach really is asking questions, okay, to stimulate thinking. Questions like, hey, what's the real issue? All right. Is there some other goal we should pursue? Maybe what we should be looking at is not reducing employee attrition and finding ways to help employees to stay. Maybe we should be thinking upstream, right? To the point of recruitment, are we recruiting the right people who are likely to stay with us? Okay, so these are the ways that we want to get the team members to explore. Okay, are there other options that are available? Okay, is there an example or precedent that we can look at? And then if your team member is too confident, how can we be sure this solution will work? All right. And eventually, when a solution has been attempted, what worked well? Okay, so questions are a very powerful way to help your team to think through the issues carefully. Okay, all right. So in my final segment, I'm just going to touch a little bit about scaffolding also. All right. So in an earlier slide, I mentioned that part of the coach's role is also to support learning and development, and scaffolding is a part of that. So scaffolding is really about suggesting strategies or resources to support your coachee's learning, right? Suggesting strategies or resources to support your coachee's learning. Okay, so in today's world, there is no shortage of information, right? So the real skill here is recommending appropriate resources for your coachee to help your coachee to learn better. Okay, so for example, you may have seen an excellent video on YouTube about problem solving. So as a coach, you suggest to your coachee, why don't you watch this video, right? There are some very interesting ideas about problem solving, okay? It could be a webinar or a podcast that you have come across, or an online article, or a conference, okay, or a book. It could be shared resources. So sometimes you have FAQs in your organization's database, right? Some other team or some other department may have encountered this problem before. Why don't you take a look at what they did, right? Go into the shared drive. There could be some case studies there, or some reports there that you can tap on. Okay, so these are some resources as a coach that you could suggest to your team members to support his learning. Okay, and that's really about scaffolding. Okay, so many of us, I think, we have come across very good resources about problem solving, and in that coaching relationship, what we do is we suggest some of these resources for our team members and the ones that we are coaching. Okay, so I'm just going to come to the end now and to just summarize what I have shared. Okay, so in summary, core skills, I think all of us would agree, are very important skills, both as individuals and employees, right? Because they help us to stay employable. Okay, they are skills that actually are very much in demand. And also from the point of view of organizations. Okay, so organizations that are successful are ones that actually have really looked seriously into helping their employees develop core skills. Okay, so organizations need to help their employees to develop core skills. And again, there are many learning interventions or solutions that can be adopted, but we want to suggest to you today that one of the most effective ways to help employees develop core skills is really through workplace coaching, because the learning is situated in its context, in the context of work, all right, and it's a collaboration where you work together with your coachee to help him develop those skills. Okay, so I hope that my short presentation today has given you some food for thought, all right, so that you have some ideas on how to go about developing core skills among your people. Right, so thank you very much. I'm going to hand the time back now to Patricia, and that brings me to the end of my presentation. Over to you, Pat.
Thank you, Martin, for sharing the values and helpful techniques on workplace coaching. Just a general reminder to all the audience, you can continue submitting your questions to the question box under the Q&A control panel, and we will address them very soon. Finally, we are pleased to invite our last presenter, Ms. Aziza Mohammed. Aziza had over 25 years of experience in learning and development across a broad range of functions. She is currently a senior specialist at NACE led by NYP. Her scope of work at NACE involve coaching, consulting, developing the workplace learning curriculum, and facilitating programs for organizations to help them implement workplace learning. Aziza also oversees the certification of organization through the National WpL Framework Inc. In 2019, Aziza pioneered and co-led an experiential learning trip to Germany to help Singaporean business leaders learn from the best-in-class practice in workplace learning. Today, she will share her observations of the best workplace learning practice from Germany and Switzerland, and most importantly, the upcoming plan for more overseas learning trips in Europe since international borders are open now. So let's embark on a global journey with Aziza here. Aziza, the stage is yours. Over to you, Aziza.
Okay, thank you very, very much, Pat, for that introduction. So like Pat said, we are opening borders, so we're all very happy to start traveling. And my segment will really look at how we can learn from others around the world and basically take from them the best things that we can about workplace learning. Now I'm going to share my slides. Right. Okay. So why Germany and Switzerland? Well, if you understand a bit about NACE and if you've read about us and have gone to our website, you'll know that we have a few partners, and we have a partner in the German system of trade chambers, and we have worked closely with them to better understand how they implement workplace learning in their industries. We also work with the Swiss Vocational Institutes for Learning, and this is the Swiss Federal University for Vocational Training and Education, so SUVET for short. So both these partners have given us a lot of food for thought, a lot of information, and a lot of thought leadership on workplace learning. And my presentation today is really to share with you the observations on the best practices in workplace learning from both these countries, who happen to be our key partners in workplace learning. Right. So what I'll be sharing is really the dual system of learning and skills development in Germany and Switzerland and its impact on workplace learning. How does this system actually impact the current practices within the companies? And also, I'm going to share with you the observations that we made on an experiential learning trip that we took with industry leaders and key stakeholders in workplace learning from Singapore to visit some of these German companies. So first of all, before I start, I want you to think about something. When you think about these German and Swiss products, what words, thoughts, and feelings come to your mind? Please scan. It's a Mentimeter. So look at these products, right? We've got Adidas, BMW, Siemens, SAP from Germany, and DHL, obviously. And then we've got on the Swiss side, right? Rolex. I hope some of you have them. I don't have a Rolex yet. I love Lindt chocolates though. And we use a lot of Nestle products, and I live on Ricola because sometimes when you facilitate, you need something like that. So think about these products. They've been around for a long time. And, you know, I'd like you to think about what your thoughts are about, you know, these German and Swiss products. So I'm just going to go and take a look at what your entries are. Ooh, wonderful. Okay. Can you see my slide? I hope so. Okay. Oops. All right, here we go. I will share. Can you see it now? I think so, yes. So wonderful. We've seen, oh, it's expensive. It's okay. It's reliable, has quality. It's excellent. It's durable. I see things like high quality, precision, you know, and reputable, world class, right? That's another one. Trustworthy, cream of the crop. Yes, if you think about cars, right? BMW, Mercedes, and Audi. These are the top car companies. Volkswagen just happen to be German. And of course, the Swiss are known for their watches and their chocolates and things like that. So I'll stop share here. So it confirms what we already think and know about these products, right? So behind these products, there's a highly skilled workforce that keeps growing from strength to strength. Germany and Switzerland have maintained high standards of product quality, have generally sustained a strong rebounding economy each time, and in partnering with their national institutes for vocational training, we were keen to understand, how do they make this happen? What do they do in terms of their learning and skills development systems? Right? What's key we found in both countries is the practice of this dual system of learning that is aligned to industry systems. In talking about the 70-20-10 principle that Albert alluded to, where 70% is learned within the work process, this is most apparent in the dual system. So the dual system has a legacy. Back in the medieval age, there were guilds, right? And this led to the apprenticeship system. Now, some of us who have watched Kung Fu Panda, we will know that there's a Shifu master. That is the master, right? That trained his apprentice. And it's not just the skill, but it's also the thinking behind it. And like what Martin has alluded to, a good coach not only teaches you the skills, but can help you to learn how to think about it, how to go about it, how to understand your gaps, and how to grow in your own unique, authentic way beyond that. So today, 500 years later, Switzerland and Germany, they have actually codified a lot of the best practices within those professions and industries. And they've actually developed curriculum that is very practical for new entrants into the marketplace to actually learn. They standardize the curriculum, right? They've made it such that there are practical objectives that the young people, new entrants can learn. A lot of focus is on the competency, and that competency is actually aligned to the needs of industry. So how do they develop the curriculum? They very strongly engage with industry to ask industry, what do you need today? What do you need for the future? Can we develop the curriculum? And that's how it happens, that the young people in the apprenticeship systems actually learn something. 70% of the time they go to the company and then they share and they apply their skills. They go back to school and they share what worked, what didn't, what's changing, what is the company telling them, what's going to happen in the future. That's how they make their industry very anticipative of the future and very future oriented and prepared, right? So that's the strength of the dual system when it comes to how they align to the needs of industry. So just a little bit. So when they come in, right, they're about 16, all right, they spend about 3 years, they have nationwide exams. The learning place is the school and the company. And what's interesting is that in order for the system to work, they need to have within the company great teachers, right? They go to school, they have teachers, like you go to school, you have teachers. In company, if they want the new trainees to learn well, they need good coaches, good supervisors who know how to nurture people. The trainees need to develop this, what we call situated professional knowledge. We learn theory in school and then we practice and then we situate that knowledge in a very contextual way. There's purpose, there's an objective, and then of course, there's a lot of focus on developing the right attitudes in the young, so that as they work through the organization, right, they will not only pick up the skills, but they pick up the right attitudes. So the trainees will go through the different training modules. Their coaches and supervisors are really qualified to be their coaches and supervisors and mentors. And then the tests are done to keep to make sure the assessment is robust, there's rigor and strength. Right. Look at this group of people, right? These are young apprentices in one of the companies that we visited on our experiential learning trip, right? This is an actual picture of them, and they're about 16 to 18. Imagine a company that also has to operate as a learning institution for a group of 16-year-olds. What type of skills must these professional adults around the company have to support the learning of these young entrants? You can imagine, right? They have to be patient, they have to be nurturing, they have to have active listening, like what Martin has said. They've got to be able to have the skills to give proper feedback. They've got to motivate, they've got to encourage. And these skills, they have to have in all the people managers within the organization. These very same skills are used in the current pool of teammates and employees that happen to be there. So that's why I say the dual system impacts the workplace learning culture of the company. Okay, in order for the company to have apprentices go through them in an effective way, they need their people managers to have great coaching and mentoring skills. And the rest of the employees that are there benefit from those skills. And that's how there's a big, wonderful ecosystem of learning that happens. That's what we've observed. So what we see is that there are good practices where there's continuous feedback in a structured way. The trainees are able to demonstrate the right attitude. They're being nurtured to do that. The job of these supervisors is to build confidence, right? Because they're young, they're going to make a lot of mistakes. So how do you make sure that they move forward, they learn and they apply themselves on and on? So a lot of problem solving. So that's the core skill. Martin is right. There's a lot of focus on not just knowing, but actually thinking about the alternatives, because in life and in fast-paced change, you have to problem solve all the time. And so there's this culture of accepting mistakes. I think when they're 16 or 17 and they make mistakes, you know, we're usually very nurturing towards the young, but we ought to be also equally nurturing to our peers, to our fellow level middle managers that are doing new projects. I mean, that culture of accepting mistakes and learning is really useful for everyone. So when they finish in the dual system at school, it doesn't stop there. There's continued learning. In Germany and Switzerland, they call it further learning. So further learning is formal or informal, and it can also be short or long, just very much like Singapore, right? With or without exams, depending on whether they need qualifications. And then the learning place, similarly, is the school and the company. So in fact, the professionals go back to the trade chambers that train the apprentices to learn, to continue learning. So that there's this relationship that keeps going on throughout their working life. So what are the strengths that we find in the dual system? There's a couple of strengths. So for individuals, in terms of young adults that go into apprenticeship, they learn work responsibilities, they actually learn about work culture, and generally they have better job prospects. And for the youth, financial gain, right? So at a young age, they get to work with adults and they get financial gain. For the industry, importantly, there's institutional knowledge that is continuously codified, continuously refined to fit the needs of current industry and future industry needs. Okay, there's standardized curricula with engagement with government, employers, unions, and educators. Generally, industry and companies find it cost-effective for training and for recruiting, because if there's a standardized curriculum and there's an expectation of assessments that's similar, then we know what we're getting most of the time. We don't have to guess whether this employee has the requisite background and skills. And then in general, that's how it strengthens their their competition, right? They've survived, and like I said, they've rebounded each time there's a downturn. They are able to bounce back quite quickly. So in terms of society, well, in general, it optimizes economic spending, right? Educational spending. It ensures low youth unemployment. And for us, it's important to see that it builds flexibility to switch tracks. So because in the dual system, they're able to enter into a vocational learning and work their way up into masters or get degrees, PhD, all the way up. There are opportunities for them to switch tracks. So this provides opportunities for individuals' aspirations. Let's say when you're young, you don't want to get a degree, you want to go and work, but it doesn't mean that you have to go, you can be recognized for where you are and enter into a stream where you can go for a degree. So these are the strengths that we find in the dual system. So this forms a background before I enter into talking about what we saw on the trip, because it's important that we understand that they have this culture. It's because they have this dual system that they have a workplace learning culture. The need for it is because they want to groom young entrants, young trainees coming into the companies. So in October 2019, before COVID and all of that, we had a very good opportunity to learn from the German companies. We took a group of industry leaders and key stakeholders in workplace learning to Germany, and we spent about 6 days and we visited various companies. The good news is that right now we are planning for more trips in 2023. Now that the pandemic has turned endemic, and we've talked to our partners in Switzerland and Germany, and they're they're also very keen to have us continue visiting. So I'm happy to share that we are definitely planning these trips, and do reach out to us. Contact us via email and through our website to let us know about your interest to join these trips. Okay, so I'm going to share a little bit about what we did, right? Of course, with every experiential learning trip, there's going to be learning. So there is some classroom, there is a need to brainstorm and share what are some learning objectives that we have out of this whole, visiting these companies. So these are the various different companies that we visited, and all of these companies had apprenticeship systems in place. So what were the learning objectives that the group of us came together and discussed? Well, we wanted to know how to build a culture of learning. We wanted to see in real, authentic, like not just talk about theory, but when we visit, we want to see how do you build it. Then we want to see the skills and the qualification systems that you have in place for supervisors to coach and mentor, because they have certain criteria, and selection criteria to make sure they have qualified coaches and mentors. We wanted to understand the challenges to sustaining this learning culture. And then after all these visits, we want to see what can we learn and adapt from their practices. So let's look at BMW, right? A lot of us are admirers of BMW. The car manufacturer is established in 1916. It was based in Munich, started in Munich, has over 120,000 employees. What I'll do is I'll go from the big companies that we visited to the small ones. So we selected companies that were very varied in size and varied in sector. So BMW, there were presentations by the various L&D representatives. Now, they're a big company. They have a good academy, a learning academy, and they have the resources to provide a lot of different platforms and formats for learning. So you'll see from my list here, they have web-based training, they've got structured presentations, they've got things like short animated videos that their own people will create for others to learn from. They do a lot of learning events. They've got these walk-in sessions. Like, that was interesting. They said, if you're an employee and you have something that you want to share with other people, you can do a walk-in. You can announce it on a schedule and you say, okay, on this day at this time, I'm going to be sharing this. And so anybody, it's like a World Cafe. You just walk in and you learn, and then, you take something from it. So that's like very collaborative peer learning environment. So they have that. And then they've got reverse mentoring. They recognize that they've got old and new, older workers and young people working together, so both can learn from each other. So you can see what we saw at BMW was they brought us to a place where we couldn't take pictures, but it's how they make the cars with robotics. It's all Internet of Things, and a whole car was created, by robots. But the system was managed by groups of people, and these groups ranged in age. We saw an older man next to it can be a woman, a lady, or a younger person, and they're working well together, right? So that was interesting to see. So they have this approach where they have learner personas, because they recognize that they've got diversity, and they want to make sure that everyone feels represented. And like what Martin said, sometimes psychological safety, like I have I'm identified by the company for my diversity and the way that I learn best. So they personalize the learning format. So that was interesting for us to see. So next, we went to another slightly large company. I mean, it's 12,000 people. It's Road and Schwartz. I think you may have heard of them. They make test and measurement broadcast media products, right? They are present in 70 countries. And if you see this picture, there's this gentleman over here, and he's sharing with us the history of his products and what they where in the world they ship to and who are their customers and the users of it. He was a master storyteller. He had so much passion for what he did and for the company, and he'd been there for a long time. So that was very inspiring to see someone with so much passion to share about their products. Was something to behold. So we also had the HR VP share with us, how do they drive learning culture? They shared that they have intentional, deliberate strategies to groom their in-house training, and the in-house training is focused on building their core competencies. So they also have a core competency model which includes all these various things that you've identified that's key for them, like leadership, R&D, engineering. So learning to them is key to their organizational growth. Next, we went to a smaller company. It's like 1,000 people. So this is a RF technology company. We may not have heard of it, but they do this one thing very well, and they have customers all over the world. Now, what was interesting here is that there was a sharing done by senior management, and 2 of the senior management presenters were part of an apprenticeship group that joined the company 43 years ago. So imagine that 43 years ago, they were an apprentice. And out of the 11 apprentices in that group, 7 were still in the company. So talk about retaining talent, right? This is where, we asked the questions, what made you stay? They were like, well, the company allowed me to learn and grow. I shifted around, I did different things, and I felt valued because young people would come and learn from me. Can you imagine the historical institutional knowledge that is retained? Like, if a hawker center or hawkers can actually do that, they retain and they pass it on, it would be wonderful. We'd have the great food continuously and adapt it over time, right? So what this company believes in is that they want to make learning as attractive as possible, right? They want to have their young apprentices want to learn and want to share. The next company is smaller again. It's 300, and this is where we had a picture of the apprentices, right? So they have one of them was an apprentice, and he's a management representative that presented to us. So that was interesting, and he shared that for them, a core key area is Industry 4.0, and they want to focus on that and what are the ways in which they build a learning culture and drive the message that everyone has to know Industry 4.0. And for them as well, interestingly, right, the apprenticeship system, in the last decade, only 3 of their apprentices had discontinued out of 70. So you can imagine if you're a small company, 300 people, every year you take a few apprentices, a group of apprentices, you want to keep them because it's hard to find good young labor. So they believe in developing people continuously with in-house training. Being small, they focus more and more on structured in-house training. Last but not least, we visited a very, very tech-savvy company, Tech Division. It's a digital solutions company. Young, dynamic, 80 people. And their office is really cool and very trendy and on trend. Actually, they've got like all those, spaces for young people to gather. Recently, I went to their website and I found that they were a top employer for medium-sized digital solutions company in Germany, right? So they continue to do well. The CEO came to Singapore to share as well. This young gentleman, very zealous, inspiring, with strong entrepreneurial spirit. And he was a great believer in using Agile because that drove peer learning and sharing and collaboration. So he role models learning and he inspires continuous learning and development in its own way. So there were some lessons learned from the German and Swiss workplace learning methodologies, certainly. So we saw that there were ways they used to build good coaching and mentoring skills in all their people managers. They also shared how they developed peer learning and collaborative learning. What are the platforms, what are the formats that worked best in their environments. They shared that there were ways to recognize employees to support the learning of fellow colleagues. So for example, within the apprenticeship system, there'll be a best apprenticeship, there'll be a best apprentice. There are also awards you can get to be a top company for apprenticeships so that you are seen in a favorable light. So they recognize not just the employees, but the companies as well. So how do they then incentivize behaviors to manifest learning at work? So they do have things that they do to recognize that. They believe that leaders must also role model and support learning of people at work. And when it comes to further learning, right, there's systems in place to recognize prior learning so that you can minimize the need for external training. If you're already picking up a lot of learning at work, are there assessment tools that can be used to recognize your learning? And in general, we found that there were ways used to promote the culture of workplace learning. So we felt that there was some fruitful lessons, and I mean, there's so much more to share, but within the frame of or scope of a half an hour, this was what I wanted to bring to you. And I really hope that a lot of you will be thinking about looking elsewhere, looking outwards to actually learn as well about how to build a culture of learning. And with these trips coming up, we look forward to hearing from you that you're interested to join us, because we're definitely interested in bringing more and more people abroad to learn beyond our shores, right? So that's what I have to share today. I'm gonna thank you very much, and I'm gonna pass you back to our MC to take us through what we want to do next.
Thank you, Aziza, for providing a very comprehensive content on vocational training. And it is indeed a very fantastic opportunities to learn from the best in class from Germany and Swiss. I echo to your words, right? All of you who are keen to join us on the overseas experiential trip in Europe next year, you may leave us a note in the Q&A box or express interest in our evaluation form later. All right, moving on, we are at our final segments of our Q&A. We are happy to receive many interests and questions in the Q&A box. So let us invite all the speakers back on the stage to discuss the topics you raised and address the questions that you sent. Aziza, Albert, and Martin, welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks,
We're here.
Pat. Yeah, glad to be back.
Yep.
Okay, we are heartened to see the active participation of the audience, and thank you for the questions. So we are now addressing them at our best abilities, and we are open for discussion, all right? So our first question is this workplace learning certification similar to previous standards like people developer certification? Perhaps Albert can take this answer.
Sure. Okay, can you hear me? Yeah, okay, I believe you can hear me. Well, one of the most important aspect of the National Workplace Framework, it really aims to provide a scaffolding for companies to build up and to become a learning organization. So I think that is one key differentiator, very important, okay, because we want to make sure that there is an alignment. Okay, we want to make sure that this becomes sustainable. So in order to make it sustainable, it must align to the organization strategic goals, right? So that once this alignment is done, addressing the company's need, then they can actually proceed to implement a long-term sustainable learning plan for the organization. So this is one key differentiator in terms of aligning to organization strategic goals. The other one is that, again, I say, the framework itself, right, it is also a provision of guidelines on how to implement, okay, the things to implement to help the company grow to become a learning organization. So it is not just purely in terms of like people's developer trying to become a assessment. Yeah, I hope I've answered that question. Anyone else want to add in?
No, I think you said it right. It's actually about building a culture. So it's not really about like people developer had different things inside that we were supposed to look at. So for us, it's really a focus on workplace learning culture, not on the funding model and things like that.
All right, thank you, Aziza and Albert. Right, for the second questions, what is the difference between coaching and mentoring? And what is the difference between life and work coach? Probably Martin, you want to take the questions?
Okay, thanks, Pat. Yeah, I'll take that question. So thank you very much for that question. It's a great question. In fact, quite a number of you actually asked that same question, and we do get that question quite often. So what is the difference between coaching and mentoring? So I would just like to say that, of course, in the market today, there are many different definitions of coaching and mentoring. And in NACE, the approach that we have taken is that we see coaching and mentoring as two different interventions. Okay, and what would be the key difference between the two? So in terms of coaching, the focus, as we see it, of coaching is more in terms of the development of skills, okay, and the improvement of performance. So for example, if I'm a business development executive, and I want to improve in terms of my skills in making client presentations or business pitches, right? A coach would come alongside me and help me to sharpen those skills. So that would fall within the domain of coaching. Now, mentoring, on the other hand, is broader. So it's not so much in terms of skills, but rather in terms of longer term development. So if my goal is that I want to be the regional director of sales in 10 years' time. Okay, so not just to develop my presentation and pitching skills, but I aim to be regional director of sales in 10 years' time. Okay, then what do I need to do in order to reach that aspiration? What are the steps that I need to take? Maybe I need to learn about how the other business units in the region are doing their business, right? Perhaps I need to then develop my understanding of what's disrupting our organization or our industry. Okay, so that's a much longer term type of goal, right, where it is addressed through mentoring. Yeah, so in NACE, actually, we offer two different workshops. We do have a 2-day workshop on coaching, and separate from that, we also have a 2-day workshop on mentoring. Let me just take the second question, which is on the difference between life coaching and a work coach. So fundamentally, again, when you look at coaching and mentoring, the key skills on the part of the coach are quite similar. So whether you're coaching or mentoring, or you're a life coach or a work coach, you need to be able to set goals. You need to be able to listen actively. You need to be able to provide feedback and ask good questions. Okay, so those kinds of skills are quite similar. But again, the difference would boil down to the goals. Right? What are you trying to achieve at the end of the day? So, of course, in terms of life coaching, the goals would be very different from coaching at the workplace. So, coaching at the workplace, you would focus a lot more on the development of skills. In life coaching, it's again a broader set of issues, right? You could include things like, how do I find the ideal life partner? How do I find purpose and meaning for my life moving forward? So those kind of very existential, broad issues in life coaching. Okay, so that's probably the key difference. It boils down to the goals. What is it that you want to achieve out of that coaching engagement and relationship?
All right, thank you, Martin. All right, I have one more question for you. All right, here. For coaches, they are not open and not very participative, right? How will the coach proceed to motivate them?
Okay, so I think, again, that's a very good question. All right, so again, a lot of what I've shared today sounds very good in theory, right? But a lot of us, when we actually start to engage in coaching actual employees and actual team members, we often encounter roadblocks and obstacles. Okay, and this is very common. And in a situation where a coachee is not responsive, okay, or coachee doesn't really want to be coached, I think a few things can be done. So first of all, I think I always like to suggest that I start with myself as a coach first. Okay, I want to reflect and think about perhaps could it be something that I said or in the way I approach the coachee that has caused him to be very defensive and closed off. Okay, so personal and self-reflection as a coach, all right, is important, and I would start off with that. Okay, now having said that, of course, then there are a few things that can be done in terms of progressing the coaching engagement. One is to really explore with the coach what are some goals that are meaningful to him or her. Okay, because at the end of the day, coaching, when you have a coaching relationship, at the end of the day, there is an objective or a goal. Now, that objective or goal should come, all right, from your coachee as well. Okay, so it's not a top-down goal where I say, I want to coach you and, you need to develop this skill and that's it. We're going to focus on this. All right, so the coachee may not think that that's what he needs. Okay, so that process of exploring with the coachee, right? What are the gaps that he has? Okay, what are some gaps that he feels he wants to address? Right, and then working on those gaps, I think that will help you to make some progress. Okay, so that would be probably my suggestion in such a case. Thanks.
Thank you, Martin. Okay, thank you, Martin. Now we have the next questions. What is the difference between OJT and workplace learning? Perhaps, Albert, you might want to take these questions.
Okay, thanks, Patricia. All right, yes, this is also a very common question people ask, in terms of workplace learning, on-the-job training, is there a difference? All right, I will say that workplace learning comprises holistic development, okay, putting in place system, okay, to ensure that OJT can be implemented effectively. I'll give you another example. When we talk about workplace learning, we talk about building up capability to coach. We talk about building up capability and system to have proper mentorship with the clear idea of what type of mentorship, what is the outcome of the mentorship, putting in place system framework. We're talking about planning ahead when designing on-the-job training itself. So, long story short, I would say that OJT is just a component inside the whole workplace learning implementation. Okay? Yeah.
Thank you, Albert. All right, there's this questions about workplace learning training. Is this workplace learning training will be taking place in classroom
Yes,
or
correct. Yeah,
client's workplace?
all right. Okay, thanks. Actually, I was looking for this question. Yeah. All right. My answer to this is very, very straightforward. Okay. Workplace learning training should take place in the most conducive environment. Okay, what do I mean by that? Okay, if there are certain training that has to be conducted in the classroom, it will have. If the classroom training will be more appropriate. For example, today, if you need people to do some calculation using some model, you have to do it in the classroom, right? What is most important pertaining to workplace learning training is that the thought process, the curriculum, the content should be aligned to the work situation. Okay, the work situation to develop the workplace learning, meaning that if you need to train a person how to do wiring, just for an example, okay, how to do wiring, the content in terms of when we talk about workplace learning, it is about how to do it at that type of environment, the knowledge that needs to be trained, the skill set that the person needs to do, right? So that is what we meant by workplace learning. Yeah, not just whether in the classroom or at the workplace. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Albert. All right. Moving on, workplace learning, there's a lot of interest on the Germany dual systems and the vocational learning and also the trips. So I'm now directing to Aziza. All right, the next question will be, how the Germany dual system will be applied in Singapore? The German apprenticeship lasting about 3 years throughout graduate school?
Okay, yes, I saw that question about whether it applies throughout graduate school. So what happens in Germany and Switzerland is that the companies will actually issue out what they call training contracts. Okay, so let's say that I'm a company, I need about 5 apprentices. I will then publicize on my website or outside my company that I have these training contracts. And these are the this is the time period for it, and these are the competencies that you will be attaining in your time with me. So then it's up to the young people to shop around to see which company they want to apprentice for. So then they will already know the duration, and the duration is dependent on the professions that they are going for. So obviously the institutes of higher learning, right, the vocational institutes will work with the companies for the different professions to say, okay, for this is the period of apprenticeship, and these are the things in the curriculum that you have to cover. And then the company will come up with a training contract, waive it out, and then the trainees will come and apply, and then the company makes a decision. So what they share with me is sometimes they are chasing the students. It's not the other way around. It's like they really want to have more and more apprentices, because the more they have in the pipeline, the better their situation is. Because unlike Singapore, they don't really have a lot of foreign labor coming in. They really depend on their youth to join their companies, to become apprentices, and hopefully to how, to nurture them, to create the conditions within the company that make it viable for these young people to stay. So when it comes to the graduate school, that's not really an apprentice already. They're probably going to look for sponsorship. I mean, a lot of them, they do provide sponsorships for further learning for the company, within the company. Just like in Singapore, when you go to graduate school, you can apply, see whether you can get sponsorship. The apprenticeship is really for that period where there is alignment with the institutes for higher, like the vocational institutes and the company. They come together, say this is the curriculum, this is what we'll cover in the school and the company, and then they issue out the training contracts for the trainees to come forward, or the apprentices to come forward. Yeah. So that's what I can share about. It's not related to going off to graduate school. Mm. Mm. So what they share is, it's very interesting in that, like, when they are having young people coming in, the coaches and mentors are also trained to understand the brain of young people, right? So that they can understand, like, the process of learning in the brain, in a 16-year-old brain, how does it work? And they have to be able to relate and empathize and communicate to young people who are still at this emotional state of development. So I guess when it comes to soft skills, they would have to understand how to coach and nurture differently, right, to the different diverse age groups that are present within the company, and also male and female development. So what I understand is the coaches and the mentors are really, they go through a qualification system where they have to really understand how to nurture young people. It's not just a straight cut, like, this is how you do it, but really just to appreciate that these are young people, they learn differently, and we need to address their needs, their learning needs. Yeah.
Thanks, Aziza. Sorry, audience, there was a slight technical glitch just now. So the questions that Aziza was addressing was, apprentice training is much easier to create a workplace learning, but how life skills will be facilitated at workplace to supplement the technical skills? So this is the question that Aziza was clarifying earlier. All right, moving next, we have another question in terms of how workplace learning is measured in terms of performance and ROI for organization. Would there be a system that will be created to capture performance and eventually create a culture? Probably Aziza can take a break and Albert can answer these questions.
Performance.
Sorry, can you repeat? I was looking at answering another question.
All right. How is this workplace learning is measured in terms of performance and ROI for organizations? Would there be a system be created to capture performance and eventually create a culture?
Yes.
Thank you, Albert.
So yeah, thanks, Pat, for reiterating it. Yes, that is exactly why a framework, the National WpL Framework, was set up in the first place, to really put in place that, to say that when we implement learning, okay, it is not just implement for the sake of implementing, to claim that, oh yes, I'm very supportive of learning, but to actually identify that when you implement some form of learning, do you actually also put in place some assessment model? That means, for example, some of the companies that we went to, they will actually put an end goal in mind. They have an end goal in mind, meaning that when the staff actually goes for training, when they come back, what are some of the deliverables individual need to do? So this is what we call having a system in place. On another situation, what needs to be done? What are the ROI that after the staff go for training, when it comes back, what are some of the deliverables or outcome that the person need to achieve within a certain period of time? So this is what I meant by having a system in place, so that learning can be assessed appropriately. So this must be done even before sending the staff for training, so that at the end of the day, and they must also agree to it. All right, they must also agree to it. There must be open channel for discussion, open channel of communication to make sure everybody is aligned in terms of the deliverables.
All right, thank you, Albert. All right, we are moving to, because of the time, now it's at 1:52. Let's answer the last two questions. All right, so we have one more question about reverse mentoring work. A young person is paired with a senior person, as shared by Aziza just now. So how can young person pair with senior person to share experience on what kind of topics? So probably Aziza can address this.
Sure. So quite a bit of that focus for young people to reverse mentor was on digital tools, because a lot of them are digital, what we call digital natives. They grew up with it, and so they know how to navigate, like if there's a new software that's come in, it's quite intuitive, right? Once you know one software, this is how it works, then you know the other. So a lot of the focus of the reverse mentoring seems to be on digital tools. And also sometimes it's about certain things that the young people have come in from the schools recently, and they've learned new ways of problem solving or thinking through. Maybe they picked up some tools. So anything that is new that they've been exposed to is fruit for reverse mentoring. So it's up to the coaches and the coaches overseeing the team to sort of like decide and to suggest what could be things that the older employees can learn from the young. In fact, the way I saw it is like very empowering. Like the young people are the ones that are pushed forward to actually share about the company and to actually share about their experiences and what their aspirations are and what they've learned. And I think that what it does is it builds confidence in the young. And then also the older employees are very embracing of it. So I think it's a whole nature of like, it's not like, oh, I'm going to reverse mentor you and things like that. It's more like, hey, I'm young. This is what I know. I can come in and I'm willing to share. So that's where I saw the energy coming from. It's more like people on all sides very keen to learn. And not just that, actually, it's very interesting. I asked the apprentices, like I asked the company leaders, let's say that you're BMW and your apprentice goes for training. And in that training, they have people from MERS and from Audi. Are you afraid that the apprentices will share knowledge? Are you afraid of the competition around you? And the answer is like, no, actually, we like it. We like the apprentices to go to join, in the vocational institutes, they have the other apprentices come together and they all share about what's happening in the company. They welcome it. They say it makes them better. It's actually something that they say that it helps them to compete more strongly as a country. All of them are geared to learn from each other and outcompete each other. It's better to do that with each other than with other countries, maybe. So I think there's a sense of that Germanic way of like, okay, let's be practical, let's learn from each other, let's make things better. So I thought it was very refreshing. I like that. Yeah. So that's what I wanted to also share about reverse mentoring. It's just a very open system of learning that we found over there.
Thanks, Aziza. All right, we have a lot of questions, but because we are very mindful of the time, all right, we are unable to answer everything. So it looks we will just cover what we can today. So we will follow up with you, or not. Alternative, you can write to us if you have other questions. We hope you have enjoyed today's sharing and have a good overview, all right, of all the workplace learning best practices. Once again, right, your input is very crucial for us to continuously improve our presentation and roll out informative webinars moving forward. May I actually invite everyone here to submit a survey, complete a survey form with us. And I hope aside from the comments, you can also drop us a word of compliment on anything we have done well. After all, we are a learning community, and thanks so much for your motivation and support.
Thank you very much. And if there's things we can improve as well, that's really good to know, because then we can learn and grow together. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we
Thank you
really
very
call our
much.
organization to work hand in hand with
Thank
NACE.
you.
All right, thank you so much. And we are very happy to have you here today. And till the next time we meet, take care and have a pleasant day.